Sarah, continue on with this little fun exercise that we're doing here. If we could poach three players from AFC West division rival teams, and ideally you take one from the Raiders, you take one from the Chargers, you take one from the Chiefs, who would those players be that you poached? Let's go kind of rapid fire here. We'll go kind of like 1-and-1. So for you, who is your first player and what team do they play for that you'd poach from the AFC West? And then I'll share mine.
Yeah, so really for me, Cody, I thought of the Kansas City Chiefs first, and I also thought of this in terms of, really building around the roster that the Broncos have. And I think maybe you and I maybe took different approaches on that, and that's totally fine. I want to see, like, if this season we could build with these three pieces. I took Travis Kelsey from the Kansas City Chiefs, and nothing against Albert O, nothing against Greg Dulcich, but I think if right now, if you could add Travis Kelsey to this team, I just think you would become absolutely dominant offensively. So he's one of the guys for me that he drives me absolutely nuts. I hate playing against Travis Kelsey so much. And I think that's how you know a guy is really good at what he does, is because you just can't stand him. Like, he's one of the public enemy number one in Denver Broncos country at this point. People just hate him. They started criticizing the way that the dude looks. Even Von Miller called him fake Gronk out there. So I think definitely when when a guy's got under your skin like that, he's pretty darn good. And he is one of the best tight ends I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's very, very good. And I hope that Greg Dulcich can emulate a little bit of how he attacks things, makes it just as frustrating. But for me, I think I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Chargers here. The guy that I chose to poach here, and kind of on the line of thinking who I would take, I think a lot of people would take Justin Herbert, but it's like, okay, hey, Russ is on this roster. That's the idea that we're having in our head right now, the roster as it goes into 2022. If I could poach any player from them, considering other positions the Broncos have, and that's where some of my other decisions with other teams came in, I'm going to take Darwin James. Look, for him, he's also been one of those guys that's been dealing with injuries all throughout his career, but I tell you what, when he is healthy, he is a special, special player to watch. And Sarah, I just can't help but get excited about the possibility. Could you imagine Justin Simmons next to Derwin James and those guys being those back end safeties, or, Derwin James coming up, playing that nickel role or that dime slot position and blitzing or covering? Like, he is a jack of all trades. And if he stays fully healthy, he's going to be an absolute monster for Brandon Staley here in 2022. But he's going to be the guy I'm poaching from the Chargers. Now, your second player, you go with the Los Angeles Chargers player. And look, their roster, they've added a lot of talent to it. Who you taking?
They have a really good roster, which is unfortunate, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I chose Rashaan Slater, the offensive tackle, who was getting some rookie of the year love from a lot of
Yeah.
people that cover the NFL. And he was just outstanding last season. I remember there was a whole discussion about whether or not he would have long enough arms to play tackle in the NFL, and this and that and the other. And then people would consistently go back to, well, watch him against Chase Young at Ohio State, and you'll see he could be an NFL tackle. And that game proved to be something that I think you could really build upon for Rashaan Slater. He was a really good offensive tackle last year at the left tackle position in the NFL. Short arms or not, it doesn't matter. This guy can play ball, and he's very, very good. And so what I would do is I would bring him to Denver. I would put him at the right tackle position. He played a variety of spots at Northwestern. He could flip over there very easily and really kind of complete the Denver Broncos offensive line. We know that there's some question marks here or there with certain who's going to be starting where, but I think right tackle, he would solidify that for the long term. So I would steal Rashaan Slater, and I think that would be a smart pickup for the Denver Broncos if they could ever make it. And I know that you have somebody from the Las Vegas Raiders, Cody, that you think could add to our offensive weaponry as well.
I do, and it's hard to ignore because he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. When you look at how he plays the game, his statistical production, and obviously that little price tag that he got there, I'm going to go with Devonta Adams. If I could poach anybody from the Raiders right now, it would be Devonta Adams. Could you imagine just adding him to this mix here with Russell Wilson, with some of these other receivers? Now, granted, I think in the idea of the possibility, if you poached Devonta Adams from a team, more than likely one of your wide receivers are going to be gone. Let's say Jerry Jeudy stays on the roster. Could you imagine Jerry Jeudy and Devonta Adams on the same exact team running routes? It's a quarterback's wet dream, in my opinion here. So that's kind of why I went with Devonta Adams. Felt like the best value player for them at the time. But I want to throw it to you now, because on the Las Vegas Raiders player that you chose, it actually adds some really good value to the Broncos defense.
You could even, at this point, Cody, you could even say great value. And I'm going to keep
Ah,
hammering that joke in there. I know Brandon McManus, I don't know if he's a listener of the show, but I'm
he
going to
might
go
be.
ahead and say that I said it first before he said it
You
at the
did.
podium. So I would take from the Las Vegas Raiders. I really like this guy a lot, and I may overrate him in my head, but I think he's one of the best up and coming defensive players in the NFL right now, and that's Max Crosby, the defensive end. And we've talked about this a number of times. The Denver Broncos are going to be utilizing a lot of four-man fronts this season, whether it's in the dime or just even in their base personnel. I think we're going to see it quite a bit just with the guys that they've brought in, like Randy Gregory. He's primarily played on a four-man front his entire career. So I think that's what we're going to see a lot of. And can you just imagine any combination of Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb, Baron Browning, who you mentioned before, Nick Bonito, any of these guys off the edge there, and Max Crosby on the other side? I just think about that possibility and that potential of him rushing the quarterback. And that's something that I would love to see. You know, I love Max Crosby. I love the way he plays the game. He just goes out there and he saw weakness in the Denver Broncos right tackle position last year, Cody, and he just absolutely destroyed them. And he did the same thing. So Broncos fans don't feel so bad. Remember the regular season game finale against the Chargers, where it was just kind of back and forth all game. Well, Max Crosby was probably the biggest reason why Justin Herbert left the stadium with a green jersey instead of a white one, because he was all over him all game, and he exploited the Chargers' weakness at right tackle, frankly. So I really like Max Crosby, and I think that he's kind of the defensive version, Cody, of this guy that we mentioned before that I think you're going to round out our list of players that we would poach with.
Well, for the Kansas City Chiefs, my final selection of a team that I'd poach inside the AFC West, it's going to be Travis Kelsey, who is your first pick there. And I was thinking in my head, like, who else could I choose? And I made the argument in my head, okay, I could choose Chris Jones potentially. Don't want to choose Frank Clark. Don't really want to choose Nick Bolton either. And I was looking at the secondary. I was like, there's nobody I really want to poach from the secondary. So I still got on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm like, okay, hey, for me, it'd be probably outside of Patrick Mahomes, it would be a guy like Travis Kelsey because of the fact that the dynamic he adds to your offense. I mean, he's just a year and a half removed from one of the most historic seasons ever by a tight end. His production and just the level of utilization that he had in that offense just a couple of years ago for the Chiefs when they got to the Super Bowl, unfortunately lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Travis Kelsey's a problem. And look, I've made tweets out there. Like I tweeted out a couple of years ago. You should have seen all the death threats and all the insults I got from Chiefs fans by just saying I didn't like how Travis Kelsey called the Broncos the Raiders after one of those Sunday night games in the post game. I said, man, he's kind of a punk. He's kind of really arrogant. And I just got all these Chiefs fans in my mentions and things like that. Look, he's a great player. And if he pisses you off, that means he's doing something really good. So all the respect in the world to Travis Kelsey, he would be a player that I would poach from the Kansas City Chiefs.